we're going to look at the coordinate plane, and we want to look at the quadrants of the coordinate plane, and specifically points within those quadrants, and if what the value is of the x and y coordinates of that point, if they're positive or negative. So we have to think back to our quadrants. This is quadrant 1, quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. We also want to think about our x and y axes. If I'm heading to the right, this is a positive direction. If I head to the left, this is a negative direction. If I go up, this is positive. If I go down, this is negative. So now we'll look at more specifically at the points in the coordinate plane. So if I'm in quadrant 1 and I have a point x, y, I'm moving in the positive direction for my x and the positive direction for my y. So for example, I could have the point 2, 2. In quadrant 2, if I have a point here, x, y, I'm moving in the negative direction for my x and the positive for the y. So example, if I have the point negative 2, 2. If I'm in quadrant 3 and I have a point in the third quadrant, my x is negative and my y is negative. Negative 2 would be example for that. And in quadrant 4, if I have a point x, y, my x would be positive and my y is negative. So that would be the point negative, or 2, positive 2, comma negative 2. So our examples here, and the examples that you'll have in your homework set, is looking at specific points, looking at x and y, and trying to figure out which quadrant that point would maybe lie in. So in the first example, we want to know in which quadrant. So in the first one, it's asking in which quadrant is x greater than 0. So really we are asking, when is x positive? So we can think back. Quadrant 1, it's positive, positive. Quadrant 2, we're going to be negative, positive. Quadrant 3, we're negative, negative. And quadrant 4, positive, negative. So when is x positive? X is positive in the first quadrant and the fourth quadrant. So my solution is quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. The next one asks us when is x less than 0. So that would be when is x negative, in which quadrants is x negative. So once again, we'll look at our quadrants. Quadrant 1 is positive, positive. Quadrant 2, negative, positive. Quadrant 3, negative, negative. And quadrant 4 would be positive, negative. And we want x less than 0, so where is x negative? X is negative in quadrant 2 and in quadrant 3. So my answer to this question would be quadrant 2 and 3. So now we'll take a look at the y values. And so here it says, when is y greater than 0? So when is y positive? So once again, we're going to kind of label our quadrants. Positive, positive. Negative, positive. Negative, negative. Positive, negative. When is y positive? Y is positive in quadrant 1. and in quadrant 2. So our solutions here are going to be quadrant 1 and quadrant 2. And finally, when is y less than 0 or when is y negative? We can look at this and say positive, positive, negative, positive, negative, negative, positive, negative. When is y negative? That's going to occur in quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. So my answer here is quadrant 3 and quadrant 4. So let's look more specifically. Now it's asking, when is x less than 0? So when is x negative? And when is y less than 0? When is y negative? So this is positive, positive, negative, positive, negative, negative, positive, negative. So we want to know, when is both x and y both negative? That's going to occur here. This is quadrant 3. So my answer to this question is quadrant 3. In our next example here, it asks, when is x less than 0? So when is x negative? And y greater than 0? So when is y positive? At which quadrant does this occur? So again, we're going to look at what our values are. So we're looking for a negative x and a positive y. So that's going to occur here when my x is negative and my y is positive. So my solution here is quadrant 2. In quadrant 2, that will occur. Next one's a little bit trickier. It says, when is x greater than 0? So when is x positive and my y value equal to 0? So that means I'm going to have a positive y value or x value and a y value equal to 0. So this means it's going to lie on an axis. So we got to think, when do we have a positive x and a y equal to 0? That is going to be on the positive x-axis. So that's going to be here. Any point I pick on here on this axis is going to have a positive x and my y will be equal to 0. So the answer to this is positive x-axis is where that would occur. Here it's asking, in which quadrant does the terminal side of a 45-degree angle in standard position lie? So standard position means the vertex at the origin. The start of the angle, the initial side, is the positive x-axis. It opens up. So this is going to be opening up. We need to label, this is 0 degrees, this is 90 degrees. So 45 degrees will lie in the first quadrant. So which side is that terminal angle? It's in quadrant 1. So my answer here is quadrant 1. Example 5 says, in which quadrant does the terminal side of a negative 225-degree angle in standard position lie? So let's look at our coordinate plane. If we're going the negative direction, it's going to be 0, negative 90, negative 180, negative 270, negative 360. We're going to have our initial side. That's the positive x-axis. We're opening in the negative direction, so it's going to come around to negative 225. That's going to be in the second quadrant. So where does the terminal side or the ending side end? It ends in quadrant 2. And our last one here, it says, which ray is the terminal side of a 180-degree angle in standard position? 180 degrees, it starts at 0 and goes over to the other side. If I'm in standard position, my initial side is on the x-axis. I open up halfway around. And so my terminal side will be so this is in the negative direction here. It's the x-axis. So my answer here is negative x-axis.